In this chapter, we'll be using statsroyale.com as our application under test. Let's go to the website real quick so we can familiarize ourselves. In the tab here, I'm going to go to statsroyale.com. This is a very popular game. I think it's a mobile game called Clash Royale. I don't play myself, but I know it's pretty popular. And this entire website is around the stats, rankings, and all that good stuff around the cards, players, games, tournaments, and all the like. For us, we'll be focusing on a couple of these pages, but the main one right now is the cards page. You'll see that the basic units of the entire game are these cards. There's quite a few of them. You'll see they all have a name, like this guards guy that costs 3 elixir, this ice spirit that costs 1 elixir. We'll click on this guy, and inside of here we'll then see that there's more information about them, some base stats, even other cards, lots of information. And this is essentially the gist of the app, as well as being able to build decks or copy decks to try things out in the game. So this is what we're going to be working on. Now, we're going to be writing 2 tests. The first test is to assert that the Ice Spirit card is on the cards page. The second test is to assert the Ice Spirit card's stats are correct on its details page. With that, let's dive into code and write these tests. The first thing I'll do is change the name of the test class and test method, just so they make a little more sense. So I'm going to change this to say card tests, and then I'll also make sure to change my file name to card test as well. There we go. And then my test method, instead of calling it test1, I'm going to call it Ice Spirit is on cards page. Perfect. Next, we're going to add Selenium to our test project so we can start using it. PackSharp makes this very, very simple. We'll open up the command palette, and we'll say PackSharp and go into Bootstrap Selenium. We'll select this option. It'll ask you which project you want to add it to. We want to add it to our test project. We'll hit enter, and then we'll actually see a few things happen. Number one is that we'll actually get a drivers directory. This directory will now have your Chrome driver, and it should work for Windows or Mac. Just going to close these real quick. The next thing is that if we open up this project file in our royale.test, we'll open this up and you'll actually see that Selenium support and Selenium WebDriver have now been added to the royale.test project and ready to be used. So with that, I mean, Selenium is now installed. We can go back to our card tests, and inside of here, let's give it a try. I'm going to say iWebDriver. Driver. I'm going to declare it here. It's like, hey, I don't know what this is. Fortunately, you have this little light bulb over here. We'll click on this, and C# will say, hey, this is what I think you need. So I'll click on this guy. It'll import it in for me automatically and solve the error. Awesome stuff. In our setup method is essentially the before each test method. So I'm going to change from setup. I'm going to say before each. So that way it's a little more clear. And then we'll make another one. Tear down. And we're going to say this method is after each, because this is what's run after each test. So after each test, I want to close the driver. Before each test, I need to give driver a value. We're going to say a new Chrome driver. It's going to be like, hey, man, I don't know what this is. We'll open up our little helper here. It says, I think you need OpenQA Selenium.chrome. We'll enter that one. It imports for us automatically. And with a semicolon here. And the last thing we need to do is just tell our Chrome driver where our Chrome driver file is. And we know it's inside of this drivers directory. And so here we're going to be using path.getFullPath. It's not going to know what that path is. So we'll come over here. Same thing. It knows that I need system.io. Bring that in, and right here we'll have at. We need to go back 4 directories and then into our drivers directory, because that's where it's at. So we have to go back 4 directories because when the tests actually run, they start inside of this bin debug netcore app. Yours will probably say like 2.2 or 2.2.3, but this is where everything starts. And so we need to go back 1, 2, 3, 4 levels out here. And then from there we say inside of drivers. So that's what this piece is doing here. And the nice thing about this is that it'll work for everyone that is collaborating with you in your repo. So if they pull it down, they don't need to do any sort of installation or anything. The driver's already there, the executables are there already, and their path, with it being relative, will work on their machine and your machine and anyone else's machine. And with that, we actually have Selenium now running, and the driver will open a Chrome driver. The first test is pretty straightforward. Let's write out the steps. That way we know kind of what we need to do. So step 1, we need to go to Stats Royale. Step 2, we need to click on that cards link in the header nav. And then step 3 is assert iSpirit is displayed. So let's start with step 1. We need to go to Stats Royale. So statsroyale.com. There we go. Then we need to click on the header nav. Let's switch back over to the website so we can figure this out. Right click and inspect. Okay, and over here we have, it looks like just this cards. So I'll use this since it's pretty clear. So let's switch back over to our test. And I'm going to say driver.findElement and I'll use a CSS selector here. We had an A element with the href that equals /cards. And we just need to click on this guy. The very last thing is to assert that iSpirit is displayed, so we don't need to find him. So we'll click on cards to get to this page. Here we are, and let's give this guy an inspect here. And I'm seeing right off the bat that we have something unique here, this ice plus spirit. So I'll be using this, but I do want to try it inside of the console. So let me switch over to console here and minimize this. And let's see if we can find it. So I want to find, it's an A element that has the href that contains, and we'll put ice plus spirit. And there he is. So we found him. And then if we click on this, it takes us to that. Perfect. So that's the element that we want to use. So I'm going to go over here and grab this string, which is the locator. We'll copy that, switch back over to our code. And then let's hold iSpirit inside a variable. Say driver.findElement by.css selector. I already have my string. And then we can assert that iSpirit is displayed. The second test jumps in complexity pretty quickly, especially when we consider that each of these cards are different from each other. There are tons of properties that each card has, but for this test, we'll just focus on a few of them for now. We'll start by copying the first test because the steps are pretty similar at the beginning. And then we'll change the name from iSpirit is on cards page to iSpirit headers. We'll say are correct on, we'll say card details page. Now we already have step 1, there's step 2 and 3. We don't need to hold this iSpirit anymore though, because we just need to click on it. So here we can then do our dot click. That'll get us there. And now we have step 4, which is, and this one really is just go to iSpirit. We'll say assert basic header stats. Now when I'm talking about these basic header stats, what I'm talking about here are really just the name, which is iSpirit, the type, which is troop, the arena, which is arena number 8, and the rarity, which are common. So just those 4 things we're going to care about. So the first one is to find the name. So we'll right click on this and inspect it. I'll also see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There you go, that's better. And here I'm already seeing that we have this nice card name right here. And so I'm going to give that one a try. It's within the class. I'm going to use CSS. And here it is the class that contains card name. So there's our element, we found it, and what we can do here is to make sure that we have the right stuff. We're going to say inner text, and we get iSpirit. So this is the one that we want to use. Let's go over here and copy the selector. Back in our code. We then say var card name is equal to driver.findElement, and we use CSS again for this. Paste it in. There we go. The next one we want is the type of the card, which is this troop, and then the arena. So we'll right click on this and inspect it. And from the look of it, we actually see that there's, I would call this a small bug. They're calling this rarity when it has nothing to do with rarity at all. But at least we see that it has troop, comma, arena 8. So it's actually the same text within the same element. So we'll have to do something to split this up. So back in here, I'll be using CSS again. And this time we can say that we need the .card __ rarity. And if we go here, there we go, we found it. And getting the inner text, we see that we have both of them now. And like I said, we'll have to do something to split that up because we want to actually hold troop and hold arena 8. So we'll have to figure that out. But this is the locator that I want, so I'll copy this, switch back over to code. And right now I'm just going to say card categories, just because we have multiple things inside of this. So driver.findElement by.css selector. Paste this in. There we go. Now we want to split this, and if you remember, it is a whole string that is text or troop, comma, arena 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab the text out of the element, and then I'm going to split it. And we're going to split it by that comma space that was there. Now I can say that the var card type is card categories. It's the first one, which would be troop. Then we have var card arena would be the categories, and it's the second one, which we know would be the arena itself. The very last thing we need to find is now the rarity, which is this one here. You'd think that card rarity would be the rarity. These guys and their namings. This one is actually just card common. And I'm going to assume that if it's rare, it's probably going to say card rare, and if it's epic, it's going to say card epic, but we'll just find this for now. So let's get this. It's going to say card common, so right here, let me copy this. And again, we can check this inside of our console. And we can say dot card common. We found it. And lastly, the dot inner text we found is common as well. So we'll copy this here, switch back over to code, and then var card rarity is equal to driver.findElement by, and we're using CSS all day. Paste this in. There we go. Whew, finally, we can assert some stuff. So we're going to say that some things are going to be equal here. The left side is expected, and so we want iSpirit, so this is what we expect. The right side is what we actually got, which is card name. Assert dot are equal again. The left side here, the type should be troop. And let's compare it with card type. Next one is the arena. I don't remember the arena. Let's go back here. It was arena number 8. Right on, so arena 8. And this one is card arena. I think you're getting the idea. And then assert, lastly, the card rarity, which we are going to assume is common. That's what we want it to be, and we'll pass in the rarity. Now, if we left these the way that they were right now, this test would fail. And it's because right now we're comparing strings to different objects, right? So iSpirit, right now, this card name, if I hover over it, is actually an iWeb element. It's not text. So the first assertion would fail. All we got to do here is pull the text out of it. So we'll say text. That'll solve that problem. And if you guys already saw it, we had to do this one as well. But with that, the test is now complete. We were able to write these two tests relatively quickly, but hopefully you can spot some of the problems with this type of automated test. To name a few, there was a lot of repetition. I have both tests going to the same starting URL and then going to the card's page. I mean, I literally copied and pasted the first test. What about maintenance? The same elements are used in both tests. If I change how I find them or anything else changes, I would have to make that change in every test that uses that element. Imagine having over 100 tests that use that element. You'd have to pray to the gods of find and replace to make sure you replace the right stuff. No thanks. There's no readability. I did my best to make the test as readable as possible, but it is still complex and requires the reader to really walk through bit by bit rather than reading like a natural flow. There's no reusability or extensibility. The code that gets the Ice Spirit card would only work for finding Ice Spirit, but there are many more cards on the page, and I'm sure I'd be testing those too. It would be better to have a single function that could get me the card I wanted. This is what the concept of the framework is looking to solve. There are many more issues with what we've currently implemented, but it's time to start refactoring and optimizing our code to solve the scripting problems. Let's bring on the page object model.